So here, once again, I've got my Doric example and I've got my Ionic example. And I did end up adding some little, sort of like spheres, but they're a little more like ovals in this particular little section, just because I felt like it looked a little bit empty. So now what I can do, because this is still my sketch page, I can just turn on the back and I could go ahead and start my Corinthian example. Now the Corinthian example, the Corinthian column, is a little bit more difficult to draw simply because there's more detail. But you can pick and choose exactly what kind of detail you use. The main goal here is to make sure that your Corinthian column is the fanciest out of all of them. So that if you wanted to do one sketch of all three, so a Doric and an Ionic and then a Corinthian on the back, that way you know exactly which type of column you like doing best. That is probably the smartest option because you don't really know what one you like to do until you try them all. So, once again, on my Corinthian one, I can start with the curved top, or I can start with the sort of rectangular square top. I'm going to start this one with the curved top, just because the other two both had the squares on top. And then I'm going to go ahead and put it in the bottom of my plate, just like we did on the others. Remember, we're using draw through. And then what I'm going to do on this one is a little bit different because I'm actually going to go toward the outside here, come in toward the middle, toward the outside here, and once again come in toward the middle. And then this curved part is going to go around behind that. So is this one. And then what's going to happen is that sort of fancy part at the top is going to be within that sort of upside down trapezoid. I made it a little too narrow on that side. And then what I'm going to do right about here is put another curved line. And I'm going to actually put another plate. So I'm going to go a little wider. Put it in the bottom of that plate. And then at that point, I'm going to go ahead and come to the same spot and it goes out. So it's a little bit like an hourglass. And then once again, this part's going to go behind. This part's going to go behind. And I can go ahead and erase some of these lines that are just confusing at this point. Same thing up here. And then if I wanted to add in another plate here, I absolutely could. And since it is a Corinthian column, it is fancy, so let's go ahead and do that. Curl that around behind, curl around behind, erase the parts of the column that we don't see through it. And then the fluting would start the same way with those upside down U's. I'm going to make these ones a little smaller than I did on the others and have one less on each side. Going to go ahead and bring those down. So I'm doing all the stuff that you've already done before first, which is never a bad idea to go ahead and get the familiar stuff out of the way. Or you can also go ahead and start with the challenging part and then save the familiar stuff for once you're kind of tired. Either way works. So now I've got sort of the basis of my Corinthian column, and I would just be ready to start adding the fancy part. So I could go ahead and put a flower toward the top like my reference image has. We'll just start with kind of the center and then mimic what I see. I'm changing mine a little bit because their flower is sort of below the top of the column. I'm putting mine sort of at the top of the column, but still drawing it the same way that theirs looks, so that it has the sort of points on it. But then it's rounded on the bottom. And you can choose sort of how you embellish and add detail to your column if you choose to do a Corinthian one. It does not have to be exactly like what we see in the reference image. So then I'm going to go ahead and divide this into 3 sections. So I'm going to draw 3 sort of curved lines like this. And what that's going to do is give me sort of rows for my leaves or petals or whatever else I'm adding. And I'm going to start on the bottom one. I'm going to just do sort of a triangle in the middle. And then I'm going to do a curve that comes out from either side of that and goes down. And then on this part, I'm going to go starting where that meets. And then my triangle is going to be on the side. And then it's going to curve like this. And then this one's going to come up. Again, triangle on the side. And then it's going to curve down from that point. And then on this side, same thing. Curve out. Triangle on the side. And then curl down. Then curl out. Triangle on the side, and then curl down, like that. So that might be the beginning of my first row on the bottom there. And then on the top part, similar concept, but the leaves are a little bit fancier. So it's going to be more of just kind of a leafy looking shape. And I can go ahead and draw 4 of those, kind of directly above the others. So these are simple. These are a little bit fancier, but then they're going to come up and be the exact same almost as the ones below. So it's kind of like that for that particular row. And then my last row is a little bit different still, in that it has swirlies directly below the flower. And then they come down to about here. And then on the other side, I've got a swirly that goes the opposite direction and comes down to about here. So it's a little bit uneven the way that I've drawn it. It's okay if yours gets a little bit uneven. And I've got a swirly that's right on the edge here. Comes down to about here. But then it goes up a little bit more to have sort of a side to it. Same thing on this side. I'm going to put a swirly around here. And mine's a little bit off-centered, so right off the bat I know, okay, on my final piece, I want this to be more centered. So I want to measure a little bit more carefully. But once again, this is my sketch, so I'm not too concerned about it at this point. So that would be the top, or the first part of that top row. And then I'm just going to add some more detail here. This is going to come out. It's got its own little thing here. And then this edge has a side on the inside of that swirl. And then this section comes down like so. So it looks a little bit weird at this point. But the main thing, once again, is that we want to make sure that we're making it fancy and that we make it look as much like our original reference image as possible, but knowing that it's okay if some things do have to change a little bit. So there, the outside two parts is basically like if you took a cylindrical something and curled it up, it just has some thicknesses all the way around. And then on the inside here, similar concept. And then this is going to curl down like so. And this is going to curl down as well. So once again, it's still a little bit off-centered, so I would want to correct that. And then I'm just going to put a little shape here. And at this point, if I wanted to just put rounded parts in here on either side, I could. If I wanted to add any other sort of dots anywhere, any other sort of shapes and petals and flowers and things like that, I could. But I also want to go ahead and erase those lines from where I had drawn my original sort of guideline, so that I end up with just the Corinthian column and not any of those guidelines. So once again, this is just one way of drawing each of these columns. That does not mean it is the only way. You are definitely able to look up other examples on your computers as you work and use your own creativity. Nobody said that every single column has to look the same, even if it's the same kind as what somebody else is doing. Be creative. Insert your own little creativity and tidbits in there to really make the column yours. But this would be an example of a Corinthian all drawn out and ready for the next steps. Now, as you can see on the post that is on Google Classrooms, along with these videos, you have a couple different ways of finishing your columns. We can talk about shading them so that they look semi-realistic. We can talk about shading them in different colors. We can talk about adding patterns and designs and just random colors. The way that you tend to finish your column on the final piece is up to you. The main goal, once again, is to make sure that it is obviously Doric, Ionic, or Corinthian. And remember that your sketches are smaller, kind of like how these are, but then your final piece will take up the whole page. So you will have a lot more room to work and to measure and to be careful when you are working on your final piece.